So, hello everybody, and welcome back to the channel. I know it's been a week's delay with my most recent video, and I apologize for that. So, I took that time to take a week worth to just sit back and absorb all of the comments, complaints, and speculation going around with Starfield, the hyperbolism, all of it. I'm going to go over a couple of the larger controversies, why I think most of them don't matter, and I'm going to discuss something that I've had a lot of arguments with a lot of Star Citizen fans about what is shipping quality for a game. So first we're going to start off with the biggest specter in the room. Bethesda announced its partnership with AMD and its implementation of FSR, their version of DLSS, into Starfield. So the big hubbub about this was going to be, well, oh, this is an exclusive partnership, you're not going to be able to use DLSS in the game at all, this is going to severely impact performance and how the game plays and looks. We need to dispel a few things first now and explain why this partnership even exists. Bethesda has signed an exclusivity deal with Microsoft for Xbox for their game titles. Microsoft's Xbox runs on proprietary AMD products, processors, and graphics cards. What I have on the screen right now is the current 2023 Steam hardware survey. This is an ongoing project by Steam to correlate data across multiple countries, multiple gamers, about what hardware they are using currently, what is the most popular adopted graphics cards and processors, and what ones are waning in use. So when we're talking about AMD FSR, we're talking about a technology that uses the current software and hardware for gaming. So basically, if you're an NVIDIA fan, you're talking about RTX cards, and if you're talking about AMD, I forgot their moniker for their version of the RTX cards, but we're talking about higher-end cards. Well, here we are on the Steam survey. Right now, the most popular card isn't even an RTX card. It is a GTX, that's a first-generation NVIDIA card, the 1650. So the majority of gamers aren't even going to be using ray tracing and DLSS software or hardware in their systems. This is a non-starter. The whole point of the partnership of the AMD with Bethesda is to get performance to a stable and acceptable level on Xbox. That's all this is for. It is hyperbolic to be this mad about this. And what we need to realize is the majority of gamers, if Bethesda does their job, you don't need DLSS, ray tracing, frame generation to get a stable, balanced, well-playing game if Bethesda does their job correctly. Now, this is the caveat. This is what I think a lot of people are missing out on what is going on in gaming right now. Because devs are not doing their job in optimizing games for a 1080p, non-ray tracing, non-frame generation experience. They have this in their head that they need to appeal to a higher market of gamers that don't own the hardware they need to utilize features that they think gamers want. You do not need DLSS, ray tracing, and frame generation to have a stellar graphical gameplay experience. I know this because I played No Man's Sky for years on a 1080 card, which doesn't have DLSS or ray tracing or any other of the bells and whistles that NVIDIA provides. And my gameplay experience was amazing. My frame rate was stable. My visual experience was great. Now, arguably, is it better now on my 3060? Yeah, of course. I'd be a fool to claim not. But I still can have an amazing, well-balanced gaming experience if I popped my 1080 back into my computer today and used it. And since most people are using a card that is a generation before that, on the 1650, What are we having such a knipshit fit for? So then we go on to the other controversies. And the biggest complaint, it's a mind-boggling one that I hear about, well, the scope and the scale of planets in Starfield and not having vehicles. As somebody who is a No Man's Sky player, vehicles don't serve a purpose if you have a spaceship. And since, from what we are gathering with Starfield, we're not going to have fully explorable planets. We're going to have tile-based explorable areas. So the use of a vehicle is going to make those areas seem very, very small if you had them. Now, granted, this could be a warning sign as to how immersive and grand an experience this might be. Again, none of us know until we play the game. This is the problem. Everything we are talking about now is speculation. And since now we got confirmation that Todd Howard is the only person allowed to discuss anything that exists in the game, we're not going to get answers until people play it. So then, I've been watching a lot of stuff regarding Star Citizen lately. And I had a conversation many, many moons ago that unfortunately I rage quitted with a Star Citizen streamer called Salty Mike. And we were discussing not just the development scope and scale and delays of Star Citizen, but what is a shippable product for something like Star Citizen? How feature complete do you want a game, and what should a gaming community expect? And the chronic answer I got out of him was this: I don't want No Man's Sky out of Star Citizen. Okay, but that argument falls flat on its face because even at its worst, No Man's Sky launched with gameplay loops. Feature-complete gameplay loops that, if you weren't expecting the moon, were engaging and immersive. Arguably. It's why I kept playing the game and went through the iterations and the updates that made the game better and better and better. So, what are we looking at with Starfield? What is the minimum launch expectation for a game of this scale? So everybody seems to have this bizarre idea that this is going to be the space game to end all space games. It's going to be super feature complete and have every damn thing you could think of in the game. It's going to be this immersive space sim. Well, no. It's a Bethesda RPG, which can go one of two ways. It can be deep and amazing, kind of like Skyrim, or shallow, small, compartmentalized, and kind of underwhelming, kind of like Fallout 4 and more like Fallout 76. Now, I'm sure none of us wants that experience. So what are we looking at with Starfield? Well, let's go check some checkboxes for a change. We have base building, we have space exploration, we have planet exploration, we have skills, we have weapon upgrades, we have ship upgrades, we have companions, we have a story. Already it has more than what Star Citizen has. And this is not to shit on the Star Citizen people, but let's throw around some figures here. Star Citizen has been in development for arguably 8 years. Not 10, 8. It went through some reiterations, the realization that they didn't have the tech that they needed, the realization that they wanted to do an MMO in tandem with a single-player RPG. So let's say 8 years. $500 million. What do they have right now? A single solar system, no base building, no meaningful story, two gameplay loops, salvage and mining, neither of which are interrelated, and no player economy that revolves around them. There's no ship upgrading, arguably. There is no meaningful planetary exploration. So then you have Starfield that's been in development hardcore for, let's say, 5 years. It's been conceptualized and iterated on many times, but the hardcore deving of Starfield was done for 5 years, arguably probably with a budget of $300 million and probably about 1,200 people working on it. And think about the feature complexity of Starfield and look at Star Citizen. Which shipping model would you like more? Now, arguably, okay, Star Citizen is a MMO, but there's not much of it that's MMO right now. The single player experience, the RPG experience that you're getting out of Starfield, is much more in line with what Squadron 42 is going to be for Star Citizen. Hopefully. What Starfield is aiming at is a baseline to build on. You have 1,000 planets that are going to be a sandbox for the Bethesda devs to add more and more content to. We're already guaranteed a story expansion. And Bethesda, including Todd Howard, have said repeatedly that they plan on implementing content updates for the game for at least a couple years. More so than they have for their other games. So you're thinking about basically quasi-Skyrim support for this game. They want this to be a quasi-live service game where you're going to be getting story updates and content updates. And they've already kind of hinted that there's more systems that they haven't been able to finish that are going to be coming in future updates. So again, which would you rather have? A hollow shell of an experience or a feature-complete experience that acts as a foundation for more? And we also, again, need to acknowledge the fact that this is moddable. Star Citizen is not. And while I'm not saying that modders need to fix a game, modders will be able to do things in the game that the devs either are not capable of given the amount of time that they've had and the crunch that they've had for development, or don't think that they think it's an immersive gameplay thing, but we do. And we've already had a modder come out and say, hey, you know what? Even if Bethesda and Microsoft don't think that DLS is important, I'm going to implement it via a mod within the first week of early access, that 5-day player window for the Constellation orders. I'm going to put DLSS in the game. And if you're questioning why this matters, this guy is the guy that implemented DLSS in Star Wars Jedi Survivor, a game that struggled severely because it was computer processor bound, did not have DLSS implemented, and suffered greatly because it was pushing the game engine that it was on, Unreal Engine 4, to its absolute ceiling. If anything, Jedi Survivor showed us that 8 gigabytes of video RAM for graphics cards simply is not enough. And the generation that we're dealing with now of video cards of the 4000 series and the 7900 series and AMD, if you're not at least offering 16 gigabytes of video RAM in a current generation video card, you're going to struggle. Hence why Bethesda went with partnering with AMD to try to get the most performance out of AMD proprietary hardware that exists in an Xbox. Now, the other question this is going to bring up, and we've already got confirmation of this out of leaks from the FTC case in the United States regarding the Activision Blizzard Microsoft deal, we're getting a PlayStation Slim and probably a PlayStation Pro either the end of this year or the beginning of next year. What does that mean? Well, they're probably going to start implementing a larger amount of VRAM on consoles. So even if the implementation of AMD technology on Xbox right now with FSR, which I want to cover a couple things with FSR with you guys. FSR is software based and it's open sourced. It's not perfect. It's not great. If you want an example of a really bad implementation of FSR in a game, I really think you should look up how Forspoken launched. It's not great. It wasn't good. It was poorly implemented. It didn't work well with the engine that they're using. They use their own proprietary engine over at Square Enix. I don't know how involved AMD has been in the creation of Creation Engine 2. It may have been a very tight partnership. Maybe the whole gear of them working with AMD is to have a new platform for Bethesda to work with that scales with AMD technology. And the fact that it's software based, you can use it on anything. If you want to right now, you can boot up No Man's Sky and launch it with FSR on your computer. And I've tried this. I will be honest with you, visually, not the most amazing experience. There are times where it looks on par with DLSS, but there are other times, most notably in a high amount of movement, excessive turning. There's a blurriness to it. There's a drop in the fidelity of textures, but again, this is an implementation that is just kind of like turning it on. I don't think the devs at Hello Games actually had an on-hand partnership with AMD to implement it. It's something that devs can literally just turn on. Currently in Unreal Engine 5, you can literally just turn on RTX and DLSS implementation at its base form. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to work. That's not necessarily what gamers want to hear, that, oh, it's just going to work and it's not going to be great. But we don't know what AMD is doing. AMD might launch a new version of FSR with Starfield. We don't know. Again, this is the problem. I love the gaming community, but there's so much pie in the sky. We know everything that is going on. The speculation is ridiculous because you don't have the game in your hands. You don't see the partnership that is going on with AMD and Bethesda. I don't necessarily know it. I don't know how well this is going to go. But logistically, it makes sense that if you're working on a platform that's hardware is proprietarily AMD based, you're going to want AMD to help you to gain the best performance out of that hardware. And that's what they're doing. Now, on computer, it's going to be an entirely different experience. And I'm going to say this again. If Bethesda did their job, actually did their job developing this game, you don't have to have DLSS, RTX, and frame generation to get a stable, beautiful, well-optimized gameplay experience at 1080p on computer. You shouldn't even have to fight to get a 1440p experience out of it, without the need for current generation RTX, DLSS, and frame generation implementation. And I need to, PC gamers like to have this, the master race thing. But the simple fact is that's a very small fraction of the computer gaming community that actually has the high-end products that they use. They act like every gamer out there has a $2,100 rig. They don't. Most of them are working with pre-builts that are 2 or 3 generations behind you. So kind of leave the classism out and be realistic. The Steam hardware tells you, the hardware software will tell you everything right now as to where the market sits with gamers, and the fact that currently, with inflation going on in the world, most gamers can't afford to upgrade right now. And upgrading right now isn't necessarily the right time to do it. The only reason I went and got my 3060 right now is I'm worried about VRAM not being enough in my 2060 Super. So, I wanted my 12 gigabytes of VRAM. I wanted my second generation tensor cores and my better encoding for video streaming. That's the only reason I upgraded, and I had cash on hand. A lot of people don't right now. So again, thank you so much for watching. I apologize if the production quality of this isn't superior, but I wanted to get this out because I want to tamper down a lot of the hyperbole that's going on in the gaming community and the elitism, and just really give you guys a clearer picture of what to expect. I'm still very hyped for this game. It's a Bethesda experience. I went back and started running Skyrim again. And I coming from Fallout 4, coming from other RPGs, and going back into Skyrim, I can see the magic. And if Starfield is built on an over a decade of Bethesda experience, with Todd Howard at the helm of this, we could be in for a really amazing experience. I hope we are. I hope all of us get to enjoy this the way we want to. But I don't want the gaming community picking each other apart. This is going to be a big release this year. Baldur's Gate 3, which is coming up just before, is an amazingly deep RPG that I recommend everybody check out. Even if it's not necessarily your cup of tea, yeah. I need to reiterate this to everybody out there. This is an amazing time for gaming. Gamers have a smorgasbord of games to enjoy, to experience. Any type of game that you're looking for, there's one out there for you. So with that said, like and subscribe. I really appreciate everybody checking out my channel, and I will catch you on the flip side.